Live. Let's just let people join for a minute.
Yes,
people
absolutely. We don't want anyone to miss those first moments where you say my name. They're so important.
People need to know who you are. They need to know who you are.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Right, let's do it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of A Paratrooper and a Yogi Walk Into a Bar. And as ever, I'm joined with the inimitable Shana Meyerson, who is the host of the Yoga of War podcast. And of course, you can find her here on Substack as well.
And there he is, the seriously spectacular Andrew Fox, co-host of the Brink podcast, and Mr. Andrew Fox here on Substack, no longer on X.
For a while.
For a while.
Getting some time off from that absolute toxic heel site. And who's that lady down in the corner?
Yeah. So we're hoping that today's impactful episode with Dr. Orli Peter reaches the people today who need it the most. Andrew, I'm actually going to hand it over to you to do a proper introduction of who Orli is, how you know her, and what she and her work mean to you.
So I'm delighted that Orli could join us, and she's actually joining us from another room in my house. So she's staying with me for a few weeks. So Orli is a world-renowned neuropsychologist, and so what that means is she's an expert in the workings of the brain, focusing on trauma. And I met Orli because she treated me. I went over to Los Angeles, where, funnily enough, Shana is. To get some treatment for my misfiring brain. And Orli has, we're going to talk more about the treatment in due course. But Orli's really, I'm really grateful to her for joining us tonight. So we're going to talk about trauma, PTSD, her work, because what she's done is, not only as the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, but she's dedicated her life to helping other people, Palestinians, Israelis, you name it. But particularly since 7th of October, she's helped Nova survivors. She's treated IDF soldiers and, a whole bunch of people who are obviously badly in need of the kind of assistance that only she and her colleagues can give. So, Orli, welcome to the bar, as we call it.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice to meet you and to share in your energy. It's delightful energy to be here.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you.
Right, so the way tonight's going to work is Shana is going to play the role of the moderately informed but not expert kind of layperson. And she's going to kind of hopefully ask all the questions that the people watching this would like to know about trauma, about PTSD, what help there is out there, and all the other stuff that I'm sure Shana has written down and prepared extensively. So Shana, over to you.
And before we start, I just want to say how remarkable it is, honestly, Andrew, how forthcoming you are about your own struggles with PTSD, because what you're doing as a hero to us all, I know you love it when I say that, is you're helping to reduce or take away the stigma. And it's so important because people need to know that even heroes sometimes need some help. So thank you, Andrew, honestly, for being.
I was most heroes need help.
Yeah. But I'm really kind, so that goes without saying. So okay. So Orli, I want to start actually tonight by dissecting literally the word post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of people are talking about this because particularly that first part is sort of problematic. After 2 years of war and a very obviously now tenuous and I'd say still stressful ceasefire, I don't know that there's anything actually post about what is going on right now. So I'd like to start with this concept of post-trauma versus continuous trauma. Now that we're about a month into the ceasefire, and all of the living in all but 3 or 4, I think one might have been returned right now, of the deceased hostages are home. I'm wondering, in your opinion, has Israel moved into the post-traumatic phase, or are there some people who are in continuous and others who are in post? Where is that delineation exactly?
Yeah, it's going to be a mix. It's going to be complex. Some people are going to be more entering post. It's not a hard boundary in Israel. Is over. Even if many of the soldiers have returned, um, they're still going to be on high alert because there's still danger. So there's going to be, you know, still has to be vigilant. And other people, probably the majority of people in Israel do not have full-blown PTSD. That's a misunderstanding that a lot of people have. They confuse anxiety with PTSD. And most of the country has a kind of chronic anxiety that's going on in the background. And there's going to be gradations of, for instance, the hostage families having their son or their daughter back now. They're going to be able to really reduce and rebalance their nervous system way more than they were able to before. But, part of the problem with PTSD is that the threat detection system in the brain gets sticky. It doesn't turn off when it's supposed to turn off. It's experiencing the world still, being a very dangerous place where they have to be hypervigilant. It's like a fire alarm that, is malfunctioning and kind of keeps going off whenever it sees, any little flicker of light or feels any increase in temperature. In other words, any kind of sensation that is similar to the original trauma. The fire alarm is overly sensitive and just goes off. That's one of the differences between the low-grade anxiety and PTSD.
Andrew, do you feel like you could put your finger on the moment where maybe there was that break between the continuous and the post where things shifted for you?
Yeah, so I think it's probably an interesting example, and Orly will be able to say if this is a typical pathway. But my kind of years of exposure to trauma were between 2007 and 2010, so my 3 tours of Afghanistan in that window. And after that, there was a sort of jittery period. I remember going on holiday to Egypt and being told off by my partner at the time for eyeing up women at the swimming pool at the hotel. But actually, I wasn't. I was just on permanent swivel because I was still kind of on patrol. So I was just constantly scanning the whole time. And that dies down after a while. And then I had a sort of period of kind of anxiety, I guess, kind of emotional control issues, struggling to focus. But it was quite mild. And I got some EMDR, some eye movement deprocessing, and what's the R, Orly?
What's the R? Yeah, reprocessing.
Yeah, reprocessing, yeah. So EMDR. And that kind of fixed it for a good number of years till I got blown up on exercise in Kenya. That kind of just hit a load of my triggers at once, chain of command failure, responsibility for the other people that were in the accident. There was a bit of an army cover-up afterwards that really had my sense of moral injury activated. And from there, it was really just a slide from that point onwards over a sort of 2-year period that led with a posting to Northern Ireland, where as a paratrooper, they don't like us very much for some relatively fair reasons in some cases. And so I felt in a threat environment all the time, just permanently activated, even on base, and then I got to a point where I was, trying to avoid uniforms on an army camp. So I'd be taking all kinds of crazy routes behind buildings to get to work and stuff. So it was, and then it just got really bad from there with nightmares and all sorts of other symptoms as well. So it was kind of a period of trauma, a little bit of stuff to deal with, a good break where I was kind of functioning normally, and then something happened that sent me kind of on a slow drift into being quite unwell.
In the post-war, or something happened while you were in Northern Ireland, or
No, so it was the explosion in Kenya that really was the start of everything. So it was a training accident. We were advancing on a dry range. It was, it's just blank ammunition, but the range staff made a horrible mistake and put the battle simulation explosions right where my company were advancing through. So it was like advancing through a minefield, and I had like 21 of my soldiers had hearing damage, 3 permanently. And given that my PTSD was quite tied to a sense of responsibility, that was really bad. It was also tied to moral injury about some of the way our commanders behaved in Afghanistan. And obviously the commanders in Kenya didn't handle the incident particularly well. So loads of little triggers. And that was really the moment I think you could say that I was sliding into PTSD.
I'm curious, in today, would you say hypervigilance is the most profound ramification in your day-to-day life, your waking life right now?
It's something I do get. And, Orly and I were at a restaurant the other night and we were joking about crowds and stuff like that because I had my back to the wall in the restaurant, as I always do. So there is a degree of hypervigilance. Crowds I don't like. So when I go to the mighty Aston Villa, I know I have a window of tolerance, and then at full time I'm done and I'm out of there because it's just too much after 2 hours. But the biggest one for me is just it's basically best described as being switched on all the time. That's how I managed to write so much, because it's a kind of therapy. So when I'm really, really, and you'll notice on the weeks I'm not doing as well as I sometimes am, like my written output just goes through the roof. Because that's just, my brain is on and I've got to do something with all the stuff that's going on in my head. And so I just channel it into writing. So it's the anxiety depression cycle that gets me, long periods of anxiety followed by a crash at the end of it. And then it's about how you manage those things that decides whether you're well or not, I think.
And were these feelings you experienced perhaps not so radically before the incident?
Not at all. Not at all. I had a long period where I was absolutely fine. Yeah.
Okay. Orly, I want to take what Andrew said and stack it on something that you said before. That of course there could be a broad spectrum of manifestations of stress, right? Of course, some people become practically paralyzed. Others can completely suppress the memories. I dated a man once who at 35 years old in a dream realized that he was severely abused as a child. He had suppressed it for decades. Like literally he's like, wait, that was so real. And it turned out that it was. So I would say, I'm sure you know better, way better than I do, but those are two very far ends of the same spectrum. And I'm wondering, when does stress become a disorder? How do you delineate a disorder from normal human response to a trauma?
Well, any kind of disorder means that it's impacting your functioning in the world. So we better be stressed. I mean, there are just things that we actually want a certain amount of anxiety to perform well. Like zero anxiety is not good. I mean, for one, anxiety lights up the brain. It really, gives a certain amount of energy, a little bit of it, and it can make us more alert. Right now on the podcast, I don't know you, but I don't want to be zero anxiety. I want to be a little bit fired up. But it's not impacting my functioning. It's not interfering with my, processing of emotions or focus or, anything like that. And the general rule is if it interferes with, work or love. Those were two of Freud's favorite arenas, work and love, to which some psychologists later added fun. But so that's the general distinction between it being a disorder or not. But there's a bigger distinction between having this kind of low grade anxiety when we're in, so many, especially right now, the data is showing young women in the Western world are, it's just kind of off the charts in terms of the percentage of women that we've seen who are having anxiety disorders. It's very unusual what we're seeing right now. And that's not PTSD. And people confuse that a lot. So with an anxiety disorder, you're worried about the future. What's going to happen? And it's usually more cognitive oriented. So it's usually thoughts and things like that. With PTSD, you're actually stuck in the past with what did happen, and that system is going off in the present moment. And with PTSD, it's more your body is more involved with it than with just general anxiety. So there's a number of distinctions that are quite clear. Also, in regular anxiety, you don't have flashbacks like you would with PTSD.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
again, the flashbacks are things from the past that are interfering with the present.
Makes sense. I do. Let me ask, because I do want to take apart the concepts of trauma and stress as you are doing here. Is trauma, as defined, is it a function of a particular event or the emotional response to that event? Meaning, I know sometimes things make sense in my head, but maybe they don't make sense when I say it. But is something still a trauma if there's no tangible emotional response to it?
Well, it's not just emotions that make a trauma, but the way that it's defined, the way that it's categorized, is there is some sort of huge threatening event that is either witnessed or experienced, and the nervous system gets stuck there. The threat detection system doesn't turn off properly. There's a lot of specific things in the brain that go awry. If you want to get into detail at some point, we can get into that detail. But it's more than emotions. It's sensation, it's memory, it's focus. All of those things go awry.
In Andrew, I'm curious, at what point did you meet Orly? When did she start treating you? And did you have other treatment before you met her?
Yeah, so I'll start that last bit first. Yeah, I had loads of the usual kind of talking therapies and something called the MDR, which is a really interesting one where you're essentially trying to reprogram the brain a little bit, is how I understand. But you're basically using your eye movement to follow something. It was a finger in my case. So as the finger moved left, you just follow it as you rethought about the memory, and it helped process it from one part of your brain to another, is my understanding. And Orly can correct me if I've got that horribly wrong, because I wasn't really interested in how it works. I was just keen that it did work. And that really helps. And that got me down a certain amount, but I then kind of got stuck. So you never really get past that point. And obviously, if you're switched on, you need to get switched off to a point where you can function normally. And so it can bring you down, but not as far down as you need to go. And it was really through a Nova survivor that I got introduced to Orly. It was Daniel Sharabi. I was doing a little bit of, not consulting, I was just sharing my experiences with him so he could share it with others to kind of encourage them to go and get treatment, like as a testimony that it worked. And Orly reached out to me through that, and I happened to be in America, diverted the route I was taking to go to LA, and Orly took me through the scan system first. We can talk about that in a bit. The kind of scan that Orly does is called the QEEG, and then she gave me some of the treatment, and it was the most chilled I've been in years after all these kind of electric treatment that she gives. It's quite incredible stuff. So I can testify firsthand to how well it works. And she was hoping to get some done tonight, but we're going to have to wait till after the weekend, unfortunately, because I went and had a hot bath instead, which is why I'm a bit red. So yeah, that was the connection with Orly, and we've kept in touch, and she's over here, and we're just on our way to Israel, and we're doing some fundraising stuff in the UK to help her project in Israel, and yeah, so that hopefully answers that question.
Okay, so that was years into your experience of the PTSD from the years of fighting. I think you said 2007 to 2010. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
so we're talking.
Yeah,
so we're talking about 13 years later. Orly, and you had other therapies in between. Orly, I'm wondering, how much of a difference does it make? At what point people seek therapy? Does it matter? Like, first of all, what's the difference between treating continuous trauma versus post-trauma? What's the difference between post-trauma immediately after or 13 years after? And what if he had not had previous experiences with other therapies and he was suffering from it for 13 years? How do these timelines affect the therapy or its effectiveness?
That was a lot of questions.
I know, sorry.
I'm not sure which one to take first, but do you want to pick one first?
I'm speaking off the top of my head. So I guess, okay, let's start with, does it matter when somebody starts seeking treatment after the moment of trauma? That's a good starting point.
Yes. Yes, it does. So, PTSD isn't even, first of all, just to kind of set the baseline, most people who are exposed to a trauma, if you collapse all the different kinds of traumas together, whether it be, a life-threatening car accident, rape, war, that kind of thing, most people exposed to trauma do not get full-blown PTSD. So that's number one. Obviously, the more severe the trauma is, the more likely you're going to be to get it. And Andrew had been in not more than one severe traumatic event. And so it's probably very likely that someone in his shoes would get PTSD. But PTSD isn't even diagnosed until at least a month after exposure to the traumatic event, because the brain is incredibly resilient. And for many people, there's going to be a stress reaction. So again, I want to separate the stress from the PTSD. There's going to be a stress reaction after the trauma, and sometimes it can be quite acute and intense. But then the brain resolves, which is why we don't diagnose it until about a month later. So we don't actually treat it before then. We might comfort them and do things to kind of calm them down and embrace them, and do a lot of community kinds of embracing with that, just to kind of relax their nervous system a little bit. But we won't do full-blown intense PTSD treatment until after that month. Having said that, on the other extreme, if you wait too long, and too long is a gradual, again, it's not a hard line in terms of categories, but if you wait too long, the stress and all the let's just say chemicals that are released in the brain and in the bloodstream actually can begin affecting the architecture of the body, including the architecture of the brain. And so you don't want to wait that long. You don't want architecture to become impacted. Like, for instance, the most supported finding across the research is that the hippocampus actually changes. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that orchestrates memory in the brain, and that the morphology of it, the shape of it, and even the volume of it is impacted by long-term trauma and long-term exposure to that in the brain. Not long-term exposure to the actual traumatic event, but if it's going on and on in your brain, it's still happening in your body.
Okay. So what is the hope of moving past or healing from PTSD if someone, unlike Andrew, does not seek help until it reaches a crisis point 10, 20, 30 years later?
So
What if somebody has been living with severe PTSD for decades? The hippocampus is affected. Their brain structure has been impacted. Is it still something that can be resolved or just mitigated? Or
we don't know a complete answer to that, but yes, there are different things that can increase the volume of the hippocampus. And so we're thinking positively about that. For instance, one simple thing, we call it a manual thing that people can do at home without any electronic fancy, space age equipment, is just meditate. Meditating actually certain types of meditation can increase the volume of the hippocampus again. Breath work, these are other manual things that can happen that you can do on your own. That can help to reset the functioning of the vagus nerve, which is probably everybody who's listening, would they know what the vagus nerve is?
No,
No. So it's
I don't think most people know what the vagus nerve is.
so the vagus nerve has been getting a lot of attention these last few years. And it's a nerve that is in the base of the brain here. It goes down the neck and into all the major organs of your body. So it's a really, really important nerve that's in charge of the balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system in our body, which is the arousal and the relaxing kind of systems. So it's in charge of coordinating that. And when we're either stressed or if we have trauma, this is one place where it overlaps, the vagus nerve is not able to do its job in keeping that balance. So when we should be relaxed, instead we're sympathetically aroused.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different manual things like the breath and the mindfulness and things like that you can do to help the vagus nerve get back into balance, or yoga, things like that.
Yeah.
With severe trauma, we have found that that's not enough. We need something more aggressive, which is why when I worked with the Nova survivors, and they could not sit long enough when I first met them. I met them a few weeks after October 7th, so the trauma was still very fresh. They could not sit long enough to fill out the intake in my office. It was too much for them. And they could not focus enough to fill out a simple intake. And it was then and there that I realized, things that I have been trained in for many years, that we couldn't just do the simple traditional trauma treatment. We needed something more aggressive. And I immediately, without even looking at their brain functioning, put a vagus nerve stimulator on them to activate their vagus nerve so they could at least sit for 30 minutes and fill out the forms.
Amazing. And I just have to say, as a yoga instructor, I feel bad smiling so much because this is a very heavy conversation, but I'm like, yes, breath work, yes, meditation, yes, yoga. And I also have to say though, on behalf of yoga, that there are a lot of different kinds of yoga. And I think that a lot of people, hi, Dougie. I think that a lot of people think that the only healing modality of yoga is the very calming and meditative. But I could tell you, as somebody who's a more physically inclined person, that there are very, very physically challenging types of yoga. Like I specialize in handstands and all the crazy stuff. And the benefit of hard work, and I also say the same thing about running, not just jogging, but running, about doing anything, extreme heat, extreme cold, is that your mind goes to a different place. You can't do a handstand and be thinking about trauma, because you will wind up not only not in a handstand, but possibly with a broken spine. But it's the same exact concept, honestly, as cold plunges and hot baths, is that when we take life to extremes, it does help to reprogram. So that's my commercial for if you want a yoga practice, you know where to find me. But yes, breathing to me is everything. Andrew, I want to ask you a specific question about your experiences in the military. So today, just today in general, I know that the IDF, the British, the Americans, probably every military on earth does actually have like mental resilience programs do actually have. Just yesterday, I sent you this article that I've read about a new IDF AI-based technology for soldiers to actually detect PTSD, or at least, sorry for my maybe if I'm misusing the terminology of PTSD, but a stress disorder in other soldiers, so that they could help to support each other, which really is, to me, sort of next level, because a lot of people are afraid to reach out on their own. I'm wondering, because we're talking about a 15-year difference, and a lot has transpired since then. When you were in the military, both in training and in active duty, did you receive any sort of formal psychological preparation from your face? I'm assuming the answer is no. No.
No, back then it wasn't really a thing that was
Yeah.
on the radar. We had something called TRIM, which is Trauma Risk Incident Management, but I never received it. It was something that was out there, but it wasn't widely used as much as perhaps it is today. And then on top of that, we had something called decompression, where you were meant to go to Cyprus and have 2 or 3 days, I think it was, on the beach.
Yeah.
Just with all your mates that you've been on tour with, a couple of beers, a barbecue, that kind of thing. And the reason I'm saying I don't know how long it was is because I never did it.
Oh.
By pure coincidence, on all 3 of my tours, I went straight from the field back to my unit, back to normal life. So on all 3 tours, I skipped decompression, which is potentially why, one reason why it hit me as hard as it did. I don't know. Because there is evidence, I think, that says if you spend time with the people that you experience the trauma with and talk about it with them, that can reduce the effects of it. And I was going back to all 3 of my tours, I was detached. My first tour, I was detached to the Mercians. The second, I was detached to the Scottish Regiment, the Royal Regiment of Scotland. My third tour, I was detached to the American Army. So not only did I not decompress, but I then didn't spend any time with anyone who knew what I'd been doing or what I'd been up to or what I'd been through or, what various things had happened on the tour. So I didn't really have anyone I could talk to about it. So that might well be a contributing factor, but certainly, the latter end of my career, people were very alive to it. And my boss in Northern Ireland, who was the brigade commander at the time, I was working directly to the 1-star. He was incredible. Brigadier Chris Davis, what an incredible man. He looked after me so well when things went off a cliff. And honestly couldn't have been more compassionate or done more for me. So it just shows you the change in 10 years. The awareness and the understanding of it and the ability to help people get better.
So, can I ask a question to Andrew? What is involved in the decompression treatment?
Well, it's not really treatment.
Drinking beer and hanging out on a beach, it sounds like.
Hey, dog's going off. Oi, enough. She's made her debut now. She's feeling all pleased with herself. Yeah, the decompression, the theory was that the Americans had lots of problems because they were taking guys straight out of firefights, straight onto a plane and then straight back to their families, and there was no switch off period at all. So it was an attempt to give a switch off period where you were still with your unit, still doing army stuff, but lovely, safe environment on a beach in Cyprus. It's about as safe as it gets. And obviously you got the lovely sun and the beach and the sea, and it's all very pleasant. So that was the idea. It was to make sure there was at least a bit of a break before soldiers went back to their families.
And this was sanctioned, or this was like informal? Why Cyprus? Like, is there an actual place where you were supposed to go with a specific?
Because it was a midway point, and we've got 2 British bases in Cyprus.
What's so interesting to me about it is, when we look at, for instance, you had mentioned early childhood trauma, and it's very different, not very different, but it's different than when you have trauma as an adult. It impacts you different because your brain is already formed as an adult, or as a child, your brain is still forming. And one of the things that gives some immunity to having early childhood trauma, for instance, they've done studies where they've matched Arabs and Jews that maybe live in the same city, so they've been exposed to the same bombings and missile attacks and stuff like that, and then looked at the difference in parenting. And And those that had mothers, and probably fathers too, but you know how the research is, they check the mothers, that were able to embrace them and reduce the activation of their nervous system. So we're talking about like on a micro level, like, oh, here's the bomb, come here, and no, it'll be fine, So during the day, just these places where the child can come and feel embraced, it gives their nervous system a break, and they become more invincible to getting trauma later. And it sounds like the Army be trying to do or may have tried to do something like that, but it needs to be at a greater frequency. And, maybe with your buddies or whoever, like while you're, deployed, if there's things that can be done during the deployment so that it's, more frequent. It doesn't have to be as intense. The frequency really matters.
Yeah, I mean, there's a connected question from Sarah, which might be a good time to address this, actually. She says it would be helpful for families and friends of people who suffer from PTSD to know how they can help their loved ones, or at least understand what they're going through. And Sarah, go check out my Substack after this. I did write an article on this one, which hopefully gives you some answers to that. It's just called PTSD, so it's on there, and you can read my kind of take on it. But just to open that question out to Orli, I mean, what would you say?
Well, this is one of the big things you can do. The main thing you want to do is calm the nervous system. And you can do that in so many different ways. You can do that through words, through touch is a big one, because remember, the skin is our biggest organ on our body. And there's all kinds of nerve endings there that, can calm you down. So that's probably the biggest thing. And I also wrote an article recently when the hostages were released a few weeks ago, and there were all these reunions with the family of each hostage. And it was so beautiful to me that immediately, intuitively, they knew, we all know how to reset each other's nervous system. The way the family grabbed the hostage, and they did a neck to neck hug, basically. Mm-hmm. The neck is filled with baroreceptors and, vagus fibers. And it's as if the parent or the loved one is talking to the nervous system of their hostage child, saying, you're safe now. It's the first experience of the nervous system safety, because there is a effect that goes from one nervous system to the other. So I just thought it was so beautiful.
That is so beautiful. I want to stack on that. And first, I just want to ask Andrew one more practical question. Do you feel like, given what the soldiers are provided with now, that today's soldiers, whether it's in Israel, Britain, America, wherever, do you feel like they are attaching less stigma to and subsequently getting more treatment for PTSD than perhaps in previous generations? Or do you think that in the military, there's still a perceived weakness attached to this?
No, I think we're way better than we were. And actually, I did an article for the Daily Mail it was an interview in about 2019, something like that.
Yeah.
Where I spoke about some of the stuff I'd had, in the treatment and stuff like that. And I was slightly worried about how my soldiers would take it. So I was still a company commander at the time. I had 100 odd soldiers under my command. And their reaction was awesome, like really lovely, and they said, yeah, we thought that was really brave, and, good job, sir, and all that sort of stuff. So that was really, really cool. Some of the other officers, much less so, actually, interestingly. I think the soldiers are actually more attuned to it than perhaps the officer corps are, which I found a bit disappointing, actually, if I'm brutally honest. But, I know the Army does have a variety of schemes now that they didn't have before. They certainly work on resilience a lot more than they ever did when I was going through training. And I know Sandhurst, my last job was there. I was an instructor in the behavioural science department. So, I know that there was research going on into how to develop a more resilient soldier, because, we always used to get assessed on reaction to stress. It was one of the things, you're supposed to be good at reacting to stress to be an Army officer. And yet you received absolutely no training in how to react to stress, and you just, you either got good at it or you didn't, and you passed or you didn't. And now they're looking at ways to train this in. And the Royal Marines actually down in Lympstone are doing really interesting work on that. And I know they've got certainly they had a colour sergeant down there working on his PhD in this when I was talking to them last a couple of years ago. So yeah, huge strides forward compared to, certainly the start of my army career. And in terms of stigma, I think society-wise, and the army reflects society. Society-wise, certainly in the UK, we're a lot more alive to it. So, I'm wearing my Villa shirt tonight, but my beloved Indianapolis Colts have the Breaking the Stigma campaign. That they will have a mental health campaign that they run, and I have a hoodie, and it says Breaking the Stigma on the front, and then on the back, I think it says something like "Not all wounds are visible" or something like that. And you wear that in public, and people read it and see it, and I've had nothing but good reactions wearing that in public. I've even had people ask me where I got it from, and nodding approval and all that sort of stuff. So society has definitely changed as well, and the armed forces will naturally change with it.
Yeah. Orli, do you mind if I call you Orli? Sorry, I know you're Dr. Peter.
It's better than so many names that people have called me.
Yes, I know the names very well. Okay, because I tend to stack questions, let me just ask one very simple question, then I want to ask a broader question. Do we have any idea what percentage of combat veterans suffer from PTSD?
I mean, the research varies, but in general, it's about 30%.
Okay. Interesting. That's lower than I would have imagined. Do you have any, again, I know we're in the continuous phase, but do we have any concept of in Israel where those rates are falling right now?
Because I don't know for the soldiers in Israel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it sort of feels to me it's a nation dealing with the collective trauma of October 7th, and then also the trauma of war on top of it might compound in a way that's exponential to other soldiers, perhaps.
Well, there was some data that came out a few months ago that about a third of the country has some symptoms of PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty striking.
So it's on a par with combat veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my question that I want to ask then, given these percentages, which again are lower than I would imagine, but I would imagine also a lot of combat, maybe Andrew, you can correct this, but maybe a lot of combat veterans don't necessarily experience like extraordinary trauma. Is that possible, or do they all see horrible things?
It also goes back to what Orli said about how not all trauma causes PTSD. And Orli and I were speaking the other morning, so I'm sorry, Orli, you're hearing this story again. But like the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, the thing that is objectively the most horrifying thing I've seen firsthand, does not bother me at all.
Right.
No PTSD on it whatsoever. And it was someone who died very, very violently. And, they were a member of the Taliban. They were trying to kill me. And I have no negative emotions about that incident. I'm glad we won that battle. And I'm glad that guy's not around anymore. So no trauma whatsoever.
Yeah.
So mine was all connected to stuff like responsibility. So someone dying on me was a big one. And then some other stuff I'm not going to get myself all wound up by talking about it.
Yeah.
It's with me, I found it was trauma plus something else. So trauma plus helplessness, trauma plus responsibility, trauma plus kind of moral injury, I suppose. That probably the big three for me. So it needed to be trauma, seeing something traumatic plus something else attached to it to then cause me problems 10 years down the line.
So
trauma is directly involved with helplessness, with how helpless you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And since you, to be crude, since you killed the man who was trying to kill you, you weren't. That's not a helpless position.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And what I have seen with all of the Nova survivors that we have treated, every single one of them had survivor's guilt, had a type of moral injury. Of course, for no reason that any of us would think that they should, but they
Mhm.
still did. The fact that they survived and, other people didn't, whether it's their friends or whether we had one that he was a survivor who witnessed 3 rapes, and he had tremendous, survivor's guilt that
Mhm.
he couldn't do anything to stop the rapes because he was being taken as a prisoner to Gaza. Um, so, rationally, why should someone feel guilty for that? But every single survivor that we have treated has intense survivor's guilt, and that's something that lingers.
The way that I would state the same, I think, is that emotions are not rational things and emotions are always valid. I think that sometimes, I know that there's some questions coming up about how to process or deal with other people's trauma. And I think that the first step is validating all feelings always. Because the way that you see something or that you think you would react to something has nothing to do with how somebody else processes their own experiences.
Actually, Shana, can I just jump in? Because Orli's mentioned this before, and I think
Yeah.
I'd like her to repeat it for this audience, if you don't mind, Orli. But you were talking about how the denial of, the international denial of what happened on 7th of October has really complicated the trauma for those who survived.
You're touching on something that actually angers me because I feel very protective of my patients who are vulnerable, and I become like a lioness around this issue. There's a concept called traumatic invalidation. And that is where, when the person who's been traumatized re-enters into the world, remember that trauma is a feeling that the world is dangerous, even when at moments or in situations it's not. So they're already feeling this. So how they enter into the world again, if they're embraced by their family, whether they're rape victims, or by the community, if they're war victims, that has an effect on whether the person is re-injured or not. And, I can give you an example with my father, who you mentioned is a Holocaust survivor. When he came out of the ghetto and he was 6 foot tall and a little bit over 80 pounds. So he was just a skeleton with, skin on top. And he thought as he walked out of the ghetto that, this was in Poland, in Lodz, that the population, when they saw him, would then feel bad for what had happened. And the first thing that he heard when he walked out of the ghetto, there was this group of women who said, "Oh, look, the vermin multiplied." And that was an injury because here he thought, again, that he was going to be embraced, that it's safe, and that his nervous system can come down. Of course, he didn't think those words, but I'm giving it the words. And then to feel like it's still not safe. That's a re-injury, and that can keep the trauma there longer. And, I don't know if you're referring, Andrew, to the story that I told about the patient who had witnessed those 3 rapes. Because, after he had shared that with me, and when he came in to see me, he was almost mute. I mean, he was just in that frozen state of trauma, and he could barely talk, and he had to have his girlfriend with him to articulate for him. And I immediately took him in and did some neurostimulation on his brain. And as he was starting to come down, he was starting to come back to life. And you could see, movements in his face and a little spark behind his eyes. And he wanted to talk. And then he started sharing the rapes that he saw. And I won't go through the gruesome details, but you can imagine it's very gruesome. It wasn't just rape, it was rape and then taking a machine gun and blowing the head off. And, it was gruesome. And, you know, the day after he shared that with me, he came back the next day for an additional treatment, and he was in the waiting room, and I can see him in the waiting room, And I see across my phone that there's a post from George Galloway, who is a British MP. Is that correct?
Former MP, same.
Former MP.
Yeah.
I'm not British, as you can tell. I don't follow that. But for some reason, I don't follow him, of course. For some reason, I guess because it got so many likes. What came across my phone is he's saying there was 0 rapes on October 7th. And I'm watching this, and then I'm looking at my patient, and I became so protective, I hope he doesn't see this, because what a re-injury that would be. And yet, even whether he saw that particular tweet or not, or I guess you're supposed to say post now, since it's X and no longer Twitter, but whether he saw that or not, he knows that there's a big contingency in the world that feels that way and denies what he saw and denies his experience. So, yes, there can be a re-injury, and it's really important in terms of what the family can do. To go back to your earlier question, it's, yes, helping to reset their nervous system through having them feel safe and listening to them and not denying their experience.
I'm curious, Orly, are there like particular characteristics, like say, like the degree of empathy or your degree of stoicism that would make someone more or less prone to PTSD?
Well, there's lots of factors that make one more or less prone to PTSD. It's hard to tease out, but definitely there's a genetic factor. There is a factor that women are more likely to get PTSD than men, but that's hard to tease out because that's largely driven by rape, and women are more likely to be raped than men, even though men are also raped and were also raped on October 7th, by the way. So there's a number of factors, of course, how big the traumatic event was, how close it was to bodily injury, these kinds of things.
Okay. So,
But I do have a theory about the survivor's guilt.
yeah.
Because I see guilt as overlapping with how empathic one is. It's another version of it. And if you're really empathic, and by the way, trauma can make one even more empathic.
Yeah.
When I work with some of the trauma victims, I feel like I'm on holy ground because their level of empathy is something that humbles me. I want to get down on my knees, like in humility. And somehow it's correlated, with this consistent survivor's guilt that I've seen in these extreme situations. And by the way, I think it's really interesting that we see a similar kind of thing going on when you have when you're suffering trauma with your mate or with your, buddy, or with a stranger even. That when there's a big threat, not only does the fight and flight system in our brains get activated where we're ready to fight or to flee, but also what happens gets less attention is there is an increase in oxytocin and other, let's just call them neurochemicals as well as hormones that make one more likely to connect to another. And so you see this bonding that goes on with the servicemen who've been in the situation together. People have noticed that and written about it and done research on it for many, many years. That bonding is not the type of average bonding that we see regular humans who are not in that situation. It's their blood brothers. And, I saw that I was happened to be in Israel treating survivors when the Iranian missile attack happened. And so all of a sudden I had to be, running to bomb shelters in the middle of the night, many times a night. And I found I actually experienced it. I was on a farm and I fell in love with the goats, Um,
We love goats on this show.
We love goats. And you can hear all of these kind of reports of people who fell in love in bomb shelters.
Yeah.
And I just want to make a point. It's very different than trauma bonding that people talk about. It's not the same thing. It's not the same process.
Sure.
So.
Sure, because if I understand correctly, trauma bonding is bonding to the person who's inflicting the trauma, not somebody who shares the trauma. Guys, I could go forever, and Andrew, I have a tendency to go forever. I think Orli's video is frozen, unfortunately. How much longer do you guys want to go? Do you want to wrap up? I have lots more questions, but it's entirely up to you. Oh, and there she goes. I'm sure she's logged back on.
My phone went dead.
Your phone battery's died. I'll tell you what, you come sit here. Come sit here. And I'll jump.
Sit on Daddy's lap.
There you go. 1-for-1 swap.
Do you have another chair so you can get back in frame?
Yeah, give me 2 secs. I'll go and get one from. Sorry.
Okay. While he does that, Orli, while he gets another chair, I want to ask about is the fight, flight, freeze, is this a sympathetic predisposition, or does it really depend on the, not to overuse the word, but the trauma, the incident, or do certain people have a tendency to react, or their sympathetic nervous systems to react in one of the 3 ways?
Absolutely. That's the short answer. Absolutely. In
Okay.
fact, we can see it in the neural imaging that we do. We do QEEG neural imaging. And we can actually see who's going to be more prone to react stronger to a stressful event than others. Yeah, and there's many different.
You're going to have to cozy up, kid.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, when I have strangers in my house doing vertical lives, we're like sitting like this, like Jonathan Karikas is like basically in my lap, and I'm like, you gotta scoot in. I promise I'm not hitting on you. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
You have to be in the frame.
No, that's all right. I'll lean in when I'm talking. When we talk, I'll lean in.
All right. Yeah. So yes, we call it an easily kindled brain.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can see that, by the way the cells in the brain are communicating. And that could be a genetic component involved. If somebody drinks alcohol a lot, that can create that same kind of effect over time. Medications, certain kinds of brain damage can create a more easily kindled brain.
Does adrenaline change that sympathetic response? I think that one thing that I worry about is not almost, without exception, the soldiers who I've actually talked to, and Andrew, you could probably agree or disagree with this, but that they say at this point they are not processing any trauma at all. They consider it a luxury. They're just like, we're in the middle of this. And I wonder if it becomes like a dam that breaks in a situation like that, where these people are well aware that they're experiencing tremendous trauma, but they have no luxury of processing it, particularly the people who are not having any time off from their service.
Yeah, I mean, also there's a factor with the adrenaline that it can be incredibly euphoric as well. So these traumatic situations you're going through can actually become a little bit addictive. Like when I think back to a time in Musakala in 2008, it was northern Helmand province in Afghanistan. There was a really gnarly firefight that we had, and my platoon basically we were the only ones not pinned down. So my platoon gunned the rest of the company out of contact. So we laid there and provided fire for them to get out, and then we kind of got up to the top of this hill, over the top of this crest, and then we were in dead ground and everything was safe and went quiet. And the buzz after that was absolutely unreal. It's the most euphoric adrenaline thing I can describe, that we'd been through this horrible experience and everyone had gotten out because we'd done really, really well. And again, that's not a PTSD thing for me, but it certainly was traumatic at the time, I think. But I didn't get PTSD from it. But you kind of get a little bit addicted to that feeling, and you take risks that you wouldn't otherwise take to try and chase the adrenaline. And my second tour, I was terrible for that. I was doing really stupid stuff to try and force contact and all that sort of stuff. So, but that means that you have a much higher chance of accumulating traumatic experiences that one of them may well get you later down the line. So, the nature of the job is like, so yeah, it's scary, but also it's like the coolest thing you've ever done. No, it's just really interesting.
Now, you've told me many times, including on this show, that you're very aware of the moment of trauma that tripped the PTSD wire for you. Now I have a question stacking what you just said. At that moment of that trauma, did you feel an adrenaline rush, or at that moment did you already know that something just changed inside of you forever?
No, I went ballistic. I went absolutely ballistic because I was a lot more senior. I was a lot more senior then, and I had a bit of power and I had a bit of authority. And we got to the end of the exercise where I pretty much grabbed the guy running it by his lapels and told him, like, you stop this now immediately.
Right.
So he stopped it, and then we sort of went back to the central position where the rest of the battalion was kind of assembling. And we had a visit from Commander Field Army, who later went on to be Chief of the General Staff, actually. And he was there with the Commander of Batak, who was the British Army Training Unit Kenya, who was a colonel. So the colonel was 2 ranks above me, and the general was 4 ranks above me. And I went scorching over there, and I just gave the colonel both barrels. Like, I absolutely just ripped him to pieces in front of this general, which on any other day I think would have got me in a lot of trouble. But because they could see how wound up I was, the effort was more on I think they were just shell shocked to have because I was a much more muscular chap than I am now, and I was very shaven headed, covered in campaign with my rifle. I think the general and the colonel in their clean fatigues weren't quite expecting a fired up paratrooper to come and launch at them. But yeah, so that was a really different reaction. There was no adrenaline in that sense, no euphoria. It was pure rage, which probably was the first sign, I think, that something was different.
Okay. Orli, since the nation of Israel was born literally in the shadow of the Holocaust, intergenerational trauma, as we've already alluded to, plays a significant role in is that funny? In amplifying.
So we had a profound chat about intergenerational trauma yesterday when we were driving.
Yeah. It has a significant role, obviously, in amplifying the experience of October 7th. And also just the darkness of the war and as you said, like that feeling of invalidation that's coming from the world and the abuse that's coming from abroad. It's coming from all ends. Your father, of course, as you mentioned, is a Holocaust survivor as well. So perhaps you can speak from some aspect of personal experience, if that's comfortable for you, regarding the role of intergenerational trauma in Israeli PTSD in specific.
That's a really contentious topic.
Okay.
Because that's been weaponized against Israelis and Jews since when I was a professor, which was many years ago. I remember it being weaponized way back then, and we're talking like 25 years ago. But there does seem to be genetic, especially epigenetic evidence that generational trauma does occur, particularly from the grandmother. It's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's meant, at least we think it's meant to warn, the coming generations to kind of be aware of this kind of threat so that they are not going to be shocked or surprised when it happens. in wartime, can be, especially if it's integrated in the rest of the brain, it can be something very useful because you see the threat before the rest of the country sees it, or the rest of the people who have not been primed for that can see it. In times of peace, it can be a big problem because there may be overreaction to things that look like a threat that actually you can't see it in context, that yes, it may be a threat, but it's smaller than you think because there's all these other variables. Because one of the things that anxiety, just even simple anxiety does, is it narrows your focus. Empathy does this too, where it really narrows. It's like a little spotlight, so you don't see the context. And if you can't see the context, then it's hard to really make an evaluation of how threatening this really is. On the other hand, if you're in a threatening situation, then you want to actually be more sensitized to it.
Interesting. So a thought came to me last night. I hope I can articulate this because it may come out. As Andrew knows, the logic of the Shana can be a little bit crazy.
Right. Well, we'll set the stopwatch now and see how long this goes for.
Okay. No. This is going to be short because I actually wrote it down because I tried to put this into a sentence. So there's a common aphorism that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Now, Israel is in fact a nation that is known for its remarkable resilience. So the thought that occurred to me, are PTSD and resilience in a way two sides of the same coin? So there's this traumatic stress on one hand, but a spiritual and emotional fortification that occurs simultaneously on the other. Does that make sense?
Who's the question to?
Anyone who wants to answer it. All of the people in the room, the dog, the Andrew, the Orli.
There's some beautiful research called post-traumatic growth. And we actually saw this with the Holocaust survivors. For a long time, a lot of the clinical research in psychology was very skewed and very off because it would only research the people that came in for treatment. So, of course, you got, and then you would generalize to everybody who, had the same experience, thinking that even though they didn't come in for treatment, they must be the same. And that was a big methodological error. And that's what happened with studying the Holocaust survivors. So they developed this whole theory about how messed up they were based on who came in for clinical treatment. But when they actually started looking at survivors, whether or not they came in for treatment, what they saw was a bifurcated distribution. Like, you had people who did very poorly, and on numerous measures, people who did superior to people who did not go through the trauma. And that fostered a whole field of post-traumatic growth. How can we mimic not just strength, but an optimism when there's stress or threat around, a buoyancy, what you can call a resiliency? How can we mimic that without people having to go through a trauma? So the bottom line, in answer to your question, is if you've been through a trauma, you're not going to ever be the same. I mean, if you have PTSD, in the old days, we used to try to get people back to their, what we call pre-morbid state, meaning the state they were in before the trauma. We don't try to do that anymore because you can't do it. There's a transformation. Trauma is a transformational event. And what we try to do is to actually make them better than they were before. And it can be a springboard, to helping us do that.
Interesting. Andrew, may I ask, I'm not sure if I've ever asked you this question, but given your experience of PTSD, do you feel like researching and reliving war as a witness has affected how you sort of move on from the trauma?
Kind of yes and no. I mean, like Orli says, you're not the same as you were before. And actually, there are parts of me that I've lost that you kind of have to go through a process of coping and dealing with. There are things I used to be really good at that I couldn't do anymore, which is frustrating, but yeah, you find your ways around it. Going to the front lines in Gaza, going to the front lines in Ukraine were two very different things, because Gaza, you're safe. The IDF aren't going to take anyone in somewhere where they might end up getting smashed. So, I was pretty relaxed actually in both Lebanon and Gaza. And Ravens just decided to make another appearance. The Ukraine piece was a bit different, actually. That was challenging because the Ukrainians will happily take, certainly me. It's very dangerous areas, and that was. I took a bit of time to recover from that. To be honest, probably longer than I would have done if I hadn't got PTSD. There was a bit of a bump after that, quite frankly. So that was a lesson about how to run these trips and what I can and can't do, and how to protect myself. So, but it comes with a lot of self-awareness. When you go through that much therapy, you can't help but understand yourself slightly better.
Yeah.
Particularly if you want to get better, you have to understand why you weren't well in the first place, and then you can learn how to handle that and deal with it and move on. So I'm very good at putting in place the things I need to get through stuff. Like even just going to the football, I have things I do before I go into a crowd. I have things I do during my time in the crowd, and then I know where my limit is and I go home. That's just a coping mechanism that you learn and improvise. And it's the same when you go to war zones. There's a routine I have. There's there are mental checklists, and then there is also that awareness of when I am wound up and triggered, and you can look in advance before you get there, so you can go, okay, if I start feeling these things, it means I'm on the wrong direction, and I need to back right off. So it's all about that self-awareness and dealing with it, and putting those measures in place.
Can I say something? So, Andrew, I think you had 3 days of treatment with us.
Yeah.
So he has more help that he can get, and I want to give it to him while I'm here. I think he can be better than what he is right now. I mean, if you can imagine like how fabulous he already is, that he could still be better, but I think he can.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to give the impression that this is the ending state. He's still in process. He lives near London, 30 minutes away from London. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Too late now.
And obviously I've been in Los Angeles, so he was in LA just for 3 days, so he only had 3 days of treatment, but it had a profound impact in those 3 days. And we hear this all the time, by the way, because what we do is we have to get to this part too, that the first thing we do is we look at how the brain is functioning. So we do a QEEG neural imaging, and we see how it's functioning. So we see what parts are misfunctioning and in what ways are they misfunctioning. And then we add stimulation, meaning electrical stimulation, to those brain areas with different frequencies, different intensities. There's all kinds of variations of how we do it. And then we can also add specific types of trauma treatment, again, depending upon what we see in the neural imaging, to just fast track the treatment, which is why we see very commonly, even after just one treatment, people go, wow, my brain, I haven't, like, this is how my brain is supposed to function. But we need to do more than just 3 days.
I know that you brought, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, it might be worth talking about some of the toys that we've
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. I know you brought some of the devices with you. I'd love for you to share some of these, but may I ask one quick question? You could just say yes or no, because after what you were saying about the hug, and also I remember listening to one of the hostages in the last week who said that as soon as he got out, he just needed to hug the person who met him, and that it lasted a few minutes, but it was exactly what he needed. I know this is going to be overly simplistic, but what you're about to show us with Andrew, is this like a virtual hug? Does it create the same sort of chemical reactions as the neck hug? I don't know if that's what you call it, that you explained before.
Yeah, you can call it a neck hug. Yes and no.
Okay.
So one of the things that Andrew will show you, this is a little home unit you can get on the internet. And I'm not promoting this particular
Okay.
unit. There's dozens of these kinds of units that are very a little, but this is something called a vagus nerve stimulator.
Yeah, there you go. So that's what it is.
Okay.
And it goes on the tragus of the ear on the left ear. We use it. And it actually sends a little electrical current to, let's just say the vagus nerve. It's a particular branch of the vagus nerve that then activates the vagus nerve. And paradoxically, you think if it's activated, you get more hyperaroused, but the opposite happens. When it activates it, the vagus nerve does its job more and calms you down in accordance with the situation that you're in. Right now, we're not in any threat, so it should calm Andrew down. And he's got it on right now. So it's just a little home unit. It's not even a professional unit that we use that people can get.
To be clear, because it sounds sort of counterintuitive, it's the stimulation of the vagus nerve that calms you down, yes?
Yes.
Now, interestingly, when you held that up, Andrew, on the bottom, there's like a dial, and it went all the way to the right. I have no idea what that dial is, but is that the result of this device, or is that measuring some independent process?
No, so that's how long the time is set for, and that's the strength. So I've turned it up to full strength.
Oh, okay. I'm like, wow, you did it all the way. Good job.
Yeah. So it feels like is it feels like someone's really rapidly flicking your earlobe.
Okay.
It feels like a tap. It's like a tapping sensation as the electrical pulses go in. So that's what it feels like. And you just leave it on there for 20 minutes, and it gives you the zapping and gives you the result. And I find it has a cumulative effect. I don't know if that's right. The more you use it, the better it gets. But
does it feel like anything while it's on? Do you feel calmer?
It's just that tapping sensation. But it's.
Well, he has it on very strong, so. But there are units that will measure also your heart rate variability, so you can actually see the effect that it's having on you. This.
You're very.
Yeah, but the Oura Ring is measuring it when you're sleeping. Yeah.
Okay, and so what's the head thing?
Okay, let's get the rest of the kit on. Here we go.
Do they go together, or are they separate?
It's like something out of Star Trek, isn't it? So yeah. There you go. So this is the little kind of thing that goes on there, and I'll let Orli explain what it is.
This is also a home unit. None of these are the professional units that we use.
Okay.
But this home unit is something, and I think it's a really good home unit, by the way. It's pretty strong for a home unit. It's called PEMF, Pulsed Electromagnetic Frequency. And it sets a field. It basically puts a field of energy around you. And this has to be customized. So we do the neural imaging first to see what's needed, so we know what frequency to use and where to put it on the brain. And since I've already looked at Andrew's brain, and the results of that is going to be secret, like I told him to put it right here and set it to a certain frequency.
Okay, and it's not touching his head. That's deliberate. Like it looks like there's some. Okay, so it's sort of.
No, it's not. It's not deliberate. It's better if it touches. But this was mine. I just loaned to him. It's just
got it.
So it's not fitting him quite perfectly.
Okay.
I've got a massive head.
Yes, you do.
But there's also many, many different PEMF units, and PEMF is something that's been studied. Oh my God, there's just so much research on it.
Yeah.
To do so many things. It started with NASA. They were the first ones who developed it for the astronauts, actually, who were depressed. And the research spread to, it started with depression, spread to anxiety, osteoporosis. It's one of the better things for inflammation treatment.
Mhm.
It's really a wondrous type of very kind of subtle but powerful impact on you.
Orly, I could be wrong. Were you at the event in Los Angeles with, God bless him, Dennis Prager and Manus Friedman? Was that you?
No, I was here in England when that happened.
Okay, because I know it's an organization you're involved with. Israel Heals or something, or
Israel, can I give a plug for my organization?
yes, please.
So-
I'm so sorry. I should have written this down before we started. Please do.
It's Israel Healing Initiative. It's an organization that I founded after October 7th when I saw the multi-levels of trauma that was
Mhm.
occurring. And being in the field for 30 years, I knew this was intense. So I got together a consortium of neurologists, forensic psychiatrists, neurophysiologists, psychophysiologists, psychologists, just a whole spread of people across the United States and in Israel to come and do this more advanced trauma treatment. And that's what we've been doing. And hopefully we'll be opening up a clinic soon in Israel so that we'll have people there full time, not just, I've been coming the last 2 years to Israel for, 2 months at a time, 3 times a year, 2 to 3 times a year
Yeah.
to treat people there. But the response has been so overwhelming that we realized we had to, try to open up a clinic. So anybody who wants to be a partner with us, who wants to support us, in any way, we really would welcome your help to be a part of this historic moment. I really believe that this is a historic moment in the world. If we don't get this part of the world with their brains functioning better, that includes Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel, those whole populations. PTSD impacts decision making.
Mhm.
Parts of the brain as well. And we want people right now to be able to make good decisions and to be emotionally robust, to be able to manage and process their emotions well. So that's not drawing resources away from their brain as they make decisions. So please be a part of helping us do this so you can sleep well at night now that you've done something to help the world.
And I've just dropped the link
Yep.
to the website in the comments. And I'll put it underneath the recording of this.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this on recording rather than live in a couple of days, then you can look just below and it'll be in there. If you want to make a donation, then that would be incredible and you'd be doing a great deed. And all you have to do is just look below this video.
Yeah. Okay. I have one last question that I think I'd like to ask both of you, and I think it's probably the most important one for our listeners, which is that PTSD can sometimes lead people to very dark places, including, of course, thoughts of suicide. For anyone who's listening who might be in that place or know somebody who might be in that place, what would you want them to know?
It's a big question. Look, I mean, the biggest problem I think with PTSD is that it's subtle and it's invidious, especially when you're on that slide into it, and you often don't realize how deep you fall into that slide until it's almost too late, and it can be something fairly catastrophic that happens in your life that leads you to either go one of two ways. You decide to finish it, or you decide to go and ask for help. And I think there's two things here. First of all, creating an environment where people can ask for help. So, removing that stigma. And that can be really hard because when you've got PTSD badly, you can be a bit of a dick. And I could speak from personal experience there. And, not somebody necessarily that people want to help because you're being not very pleasant. So it can be really, really tricky. So, having that love and understanding is really, really important. And then the second thing to know is that if you take the option of asking for help, then there's every chance you can get better if you get the right help. And that pain can go away, which is, the most important thing of all. And I'll let Orli have her say.
No, I would just add that, when you have PTSD, the networks for self-awareness can be going awry. So you may not even know, I'm piggybacking somewhat of what you're saying, you may not even know how bad it is, which is, by the way, the beauty of showing them the QEEG imaging so they can see it's your brain, it's not you. And because the self-reflection part of the brain may not be functioning well, you should know certain goal posts. If you're thinking about killing yourself, even if you feel you're fine, you're not. And there is help. And the main thing I want people to know is that it's not you. It's not you. It's your brain that's malfunctioning. Just like if your kidney is malfunctioning, you go to a professional to get it functioning better. There's no shame in this. It is an organ in your body that needs some help. And it's so beautiful. I love these moments when I treat people who've been traumatized, like the man that I told you who had witnessed the rapes, and he came in so numb and almost mute. And as his nervous system, not just as his brain, other networks in his brain started coming more online and he began to talk, you see who the person is as that lifts. And so many times I have wanted to get up in session, and shake their hands and say, I finally met who you are. Like, it's nice to meet you. So just know it's not you. And help can be on the way. So call us and we'll try to help you.
Yeah. So I did look up, and I just want to say that if anyone listening is struggling or thinking about suicide, to please reach out for help. Some resources I found in Israel, Eran, ERAN, offers suicide and crisis helpline at 1201. It's available in Hebrew, Arabic, English, and Russian. In the United States, you could call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And in the UK, Samaritans can be reached at 116 116 123. So I think I made that confusing. 116 123. All the services are free and available 24/7. And for those people who feel more comfortable with anonymity, I think that this presents like a really palatable option.
And don't wait until it's that severe. If you even start having thoughts about it, reach out for help.
Amen. Andrew, can we get you on screen? We can't finish without saying, first of all, is there anything either of you would like to add before we wrap up? Because
No, I think that was a pretty powerful way to end. I think that does the job.
thank you so much, Orli. I've been anticipating this conversation. Thank you for joining us. And Andrew, as always, thank you for how open you are. And I hope that you both understand what an enormous impact and an important impact you're having on the world. You never know who is hearing a conversation like this, and you never know what might come of it. So thank you both. And as we say in the old country, l'chaim.
We'll see you next time. And cheers to you.
Thank you for being such a great interviewer.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.